Hello? 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 Testing 1, 2, 3.
That's about as loud as I can get her. Okay, gotta talk loud, Monty.
All right. Well, I turned it up on my end too. Is that better?
A little bit. We'll be with you in just after the pledge, okay?
Sounds good. Thanks, Dr. Brenner.
It is 6:02. I will call the meeting of the Grand Forks Public School Board to order. First item of business is the call to order and pledge of allegiance. Thank you for bearing with us for a moment there. Our next item on the agenda, item A, is recognition of outgoing board member Monty Gockler, and for this one I will turn to Dr. Brenner.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Good evening, Monty. Thanks for joining us from somewhere in Idaho. Appreciate that very much. Your certificates and Lifetime Achievement Pass are in the mail if they haven't made it to you already. So anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and make a couple of comments about your service on the board, Monty. You've been a true student advocate and supporter of teaching and learning, always at the table. Your decisions were always rooted in the student experience, and you connected your position at the University of North Dakota with emerging and also urgent school district challenges, so we thank you for that. And in all of your decision-making, you always balanced the community's interests with some of the budget challenges that we had. So, and finally, Monty, you always led from the heart, and we will miss you at the table. So with that, those are my comments for you. Thank you for joining us tonight. And I would imagine you'd have a word or two to say, and we'll see if we can cue up the volume so everybody can hear you in the room, okay?
All right. Oh, well, thanks, Dr. Brenner, for your kind words. Am I coming through okay?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, I would just say Grand Forks Public Schools has been an amazing home for my husband, my children, and myself. And I appreciated the opportunity to provide a small amount of service to the school district, to students, and to teachers in my short capacity on the board. It was an absolute pleasure, and I learned a lot. So thank you to everybody who continues to serve, and I wish you all well in your coming year. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Monty.
Thank you. Item B on our agenda is the appointment of student board member and oath of office. With that student not present tonight, we will move on to item C on the agenda. That is the reading of the school board meeting norms. Bill?
Yeah. Be prepared, be on time, value and respect each other, exercise thoughtful deliberation and conversation, be professional at the board table when visiting with the general public, speak up when the norms are not being followed, advocate on behalf of students, and keep the community in mind.
Thank you. Item number 2 on the agenda, approval of the agenda. I would seek a motion for approval of tonight's agenda. Moved by Joel.
Second.
Second by Jeff. We'll take a roll call vote.
Manley? Yes. Burgers, absent. Clement?
Yes.
Yes. Tomasino?
Yes.
Flynn?
Yes.
Klein?
Thank you. Motion passes. Item number 3. 7. Thank you. Item number 3 on the agenda is public comments. We are about to convene into public comment period for our meeting. Although state law does not require us to hold public comment period, we have chosen to do so because we believe it is crucial for us to hear from our community members about their concerns and issues. Having said that, please note that the board is here to listen. The public comment period is not designated to be a discussion. Accordingly, please do not expect board members to respond to your concerns or questions now. This is because we take your concerns and questions seriously and want to have sufficient time to process and research issues if need be. We will, however, respond to your questions and concerns at a future meeting or have proper staff get back to you at the appropriate time. I also want to point out that under state and federal privacy laws, we are unable to entertain any comments or questions about school district personnel. Please know, however, we take personnel concerns very seriously. On these matters, we would ask that you go through the appropriate administrative channels. Finally, we recognize that right now in our nation and community are polarized on a number of issues. That said, we want our school board meetings to serve as an example to our students that members of our school board and members of our community can deal with controversial issues in a civil manner and demonstrate mutual respect for one another. In that spirit, we will insist that all speakers and members of the audience maintain civility and respect for any divergent views that others possess. We ask speakers please address their comments to the board directly. Finally, I want to ask and remind everyone that you may submit written comments to the board in lieu of speaking during the public comment period if you so choose. The board will now entertain public comments. Each individual speaker is allotted up to 3 minutes. The individual time limits will be enforced so that members of the public who may, wish to speak may allow to do so now. I have one blue comment card. If there are any others, please make their way to the front, but I have one at this time. Miss Kathy Williams, please make your way to the microphone.
Thank you. I'm here tonight to support a professional colleague I came to know, respect, and deeply admire in my time in the curriculum department of the Grand Forks Public Schools. I taught in this district for about 25 years before becoming in 2009 the only secondary coach for curriculum. In my time in the department, I experienced the same kind of hostility, alienation, and damage to my professional reputation that my respected colleague is experiencing
Point of order,
currently.
Mr. Anderson. I think that
It is extremely stressful for me to recall my time in
Ms.
that
Williams,
setting, but it is out of
can I please have
respect
you
and
pause?
concern for her and for others who have been and will be treated
Stop,
in this
please.
manner
Ms.
that I am
Williams?
here tonight.
Please stop.
Is Josh from the Herald here? Could I share this with you then instead? Okay.
Thank you. Item number 4 on the agenda, we'll move on at this time. Superintendent's recommendations for discussion. The Grand Forks Youth Behavior Survey. Ms. Galach?
Thank you, Vice Chair Anderson and members of the board. I'm here tonight to report to you on the Youth Behavior Survey, and this is a survey, oh, hold on a second, I have to get my clicker going, even though Cindy warned me to turn it on. I obviously didn't. We'll give a minute to queue up, I think, the other document here. So the Youth Behavior Survey, just so you're aware, is a survey that we give out every other year to our 8th graders, our 11th graders, and our seniors on their perceptions and their engagement in substance use. The purpose behind the survey is to make sure that we are tracking student data around substance use in the effort to make sure that we are looking at preventative measures. And the Drug Free Communities grant funds this survey. The primary purpose of this survey is to ensure that we have enough data to drive that grant and to make sure that we're paying attention to the behaviors of our youth and trying to keep this community safe and well. So as she queues up the PowerPoint, I'll just give you the big ticket items that we measure. Thank you, Cindy. Before I move on, just a little bit more about the survey itself. So there are local student use measures indicated in the survey versus the national level survey, which is the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which maybe you're familiar with as well. The difference between the two, like I said, one is primarily focused on the local norms. That's what I'm going to report on tonight. The other one is compared to more national level norms and also includes other risky behaviors ranging from even sleep patterns to substance use to eating and that sort of thing. The measures that you see up there are required by the Drug-Free Communities Grant. So we look at tobacco use and perceptions, alcohol, prescription drugs, and marijuana. And a few years ago, when Sarah Shimmick was operating or kind of doing the oversight of this grant, we added in some more local data around vaping because we know vaping has become one of our primary concerns. This year, we added some additional measures based on the feedback from our youth themselves, and that is around prevention. So there's the question that we put in at the end to try to determine what might prevent kids from engaging in these substances in the first place. The Drug-Free Communities Grant, we receive either between $120,000 or $150,000, depends on the year of the grant, and we have matching requirements for that, but it really helps us fund three primary buckets. The first one is the Substance Abuse Prevention Council. That council is comprised of 12 different sectors, so we have members of clergy. Actually, Dave Berger serves on that council. We have representatives from the University of North Dakota, the police force, a wide smattering of people that are dedicated to try to prevent substance use in our district or in our community writ large. From a youth prevention standpoint, you may be familiar with the Mayor's Youth Commission. That is a group of volunteer students in middle school and high school who get together monthly and want to do good in the world. So we basically come together, they learn leadership skills, they learn speaking skills, they put together PSAs to try to help kids make positive decisions and things of that nature. So that's another big bucket, is the youth prevention and education piece. And then finally, that grant helps us fund the Drug-Free Communities Grant Manager. We actually just hired somebody. We haven't onboarded them yet because we want to make sure we get the grant, and we have to wait a couple weeks to have that final re-uppance confirmed coming down the pike here. So that person will step in and oversee all of these operations. From a logistical standpoint, I already mentioned this, grades 8, 9, 11 are surveyed. This year we had a great dip in our completion rate. We had 870 students out of the 1,700 complete the survey. So more than 1,300 logged on, but only 870 actually completed the entire survey. I'm not sure what to attribute that to. I don't know if students are sick of surveys. I don't know if they didn't like the questions. I don't know if it was given to them in a rushed manner, but that's something that we need to dig into to make sure that our data is good. I already mentioned that we added a couple of questions to make sure that we're measuring vaping use and preventative efforts. And we also, in an effort to meet the drug-free communities commitment to equity, we added a non-binary status indicator for our students. And so about 2% of our students indicated non-binary status. They are not represented in these survey results. They came back in a separate bucket. And because of confidentiality factors, we wanted to make sure that we were protecting privacy there. So that we're not going to report out on them today, but I can take questions on their rates comparatively. In this slide, you can see that students reported back on their past 30-day use. Yes, Jay. Yes.
I just did.
Yes.
So the questions, these are all online,
Correct.
and like, do the kids get this on, like, do they have time allotted during class period
Yes.
to answer these? So them not responding is willful. They have plenty of opportunity to do so in a school setting.
I think so. So depending on the school, they chose a class period and asked those teachers to distribute the surveys. So how that manifested itself in the NJ, I really don't know. Our teachers are really good at doing that and allotting time, but there are times when it feels a bit more rushed because of the other pushes and pulls of the classroom. So, yeah.
But in classroom setting, not extracurricular
Correct,
setting. Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. Any other questions? All right, on this slide you can see the reports, self-reports of the past 30-day use. The gray bar indicates a positive indicator that they did choose to use any of the substances you see up there. Are measuring, again, alcoholic drinks, smoking a cigarette, or using any sort of tobacco form, quite honestly, that's not a vaping device, and then prescription drugs. Interestingly, and maybe not surprisingly, you can see that our use rates go up as students age. That may be because of the age itself, could be a variety of factors, but that's something that I think you'll see across the board as we continue to go through the data. Positive news here, when you look at our cigarette use, our tobacco use, it's really low and static as far as not more kids engaging in those activities, and the same thing for prescription drugs. So in this indicator, alcohol seems to be the primary substance of choice. When you look at whether or not students believe there is a risk of harm, I think it's interesting because the percentages go up. So you can see in 8th grade, if a person engages in 5 or more alcoholic drinks once or twice a week, our 8th graders think that there's a slight or no risk to 14%. By the time they get to 11th grade, 25% of them think it's really kind of no big deal. You can see, again, a slight uptick in the percentages for smoking and then for prescription drug use. And so, again, what to attribute that to? It may just be an age thing. It may be a demystification, something for us to definitely dig into. Please interrupt me if you would like at any time. Here, as far as friend perceptions, thank you, Jay.
I couldn't resist that one. Is this data, do we know enough to correlate it year on year? Like, is this, and I think there's some statistics coming up, but in a general sense, are we getting better?
Yes, and that is at the end of the presentation. So if you don't mind, we can kind of put a pin on that and talk about it towards the end when there is a little bit of trend data. But overall, it depends on the substance is the answer. So we'll get to that in a bit. I like your curiosity. Thanks, Jay. As far as friend perception, so how wrong do you think your peers or your friends feel it is for you to have the one to do 2 drinks of alcoholic beverage every day, smoke tobacco, or use prescription drugs? Again, you can see that their perceptions on whether or not it is wrong increase as they get older. So by the time they get to 11th grade, 20% reported that their friends probably wouldn't think it was that big of a deal. And again, that goes across the board. Family perception data is a little bit different. How wrong would your parents or guardians feel it would be for you to imbibe? You can see our numbers are really strong there. And one of the big messages that the Substance Abuse Prevention Council tries to purport across the community is that parents matter. We send out parents lead communications. We try to empower our families to talk to their kids about substance use and what their perceptions are around them, because there is a lot of national data around the fact that that's really important, that we have those conversations in our household. And our students indicate that that does matter to them when it comes down to them making a choice as well. Some of the added measurements that are local data is how many days did you use marijuana, and then how many days did you use a vape device. And as you can see, once you get to 11th grade, again, the numbers tick up a little bit there on both of those indicators. Something that's interesting is that just today I was reading a national level statistic, and our numbers, even though it's like 1 in 10 kids, are much lower than they are nationally. On a national level, excuse me while I grab that here. On a national level, there were closer to 46% of students indicated that they were regular users of vaping devices. There wasn't a marijuana indicator on that statistic, but locally, again, our norms are lower than that, which I found empowering. It also made me wonder, again, we didn't have a great return on the survey, so we have some more work to do there. How addictive do you think vape products are? Here's a place that we need to dig into, because by the time we get to 11th grade, almost 25% or 1 in 4 of our students don't really think that there are addiction issues when it comes to vaping. And I could look to Dr. Lund right now, and he could probably give us a little tutorial on the chemicals and the nicotine factors that are involved in those devices, and just the magnitude of, as it compares to a cigarette, right? It increases in those devices. And I find this concerning in particular, because we know that vapes are quite addictive, arguably more addictive than cigarettes, depending on the research that you read. So that's something that we need to work with an educative factor around. And then the perception or risk around these extra substances. How much do you think people risk harming themselves, either physically or in other ways, if they use marijuana once or twice a week? I'm going to give you a little bit of pause to look at this slide because, again, when we look at our 11th graders, I'm not trying to pick on our juniors at all, but I don't know if it's a demystification factor in their minds or whatnot, but when 44% report that it's really not harmful to use once or twice a week, I personally have some concerns around there. So again, from an education standpoint, from us reaching out to our families and our parents to give them the messaging on how to have these conversations in their household, we have some work as a committee to do there. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the vape product use there is pretty static across grades and much lower. Friend perception, how wrong do your friends or your peers feel it would be for you to use marijuana? 8th grade, 10%, a little wrong. 9th grade, up to 19%. 11th grade, 31%. And that kind of aligns with the previous slide. And then family perception. Our students know and understand that their families, writ large, would disagree with them on whether or not it is harmful. Because we adults maybe have a little more experience and understanding in what the long-term effects can be of these products. And here's some of your question, I think, Jay, and if not, we can dig into it a little bit more. But I put together this slide just to show a bit more of a comparison between the baseline data. So 2018 was the first year that this grant was procured, and actually it was procured under Altru Healthcare Systems, and they oversaw the grant for the first 5 years. We took it over last year for years 6 through 10. But you can see back in 2018 where the baseline is, and then the 2022 survey results, and then the most recent results. And what I did is I highlighted in green the areas in which we saw, compared to baseline, a significant improvement. So the use of alcohol has gone down on the aggregate. Peer disapproval of alcohol has gone up, which is the number that we want there. We don't want peers to approve. And significantly statistically significant. Cigarette use down, peer disapproval of cigarette use up. And the other measures were really actually quite high in the first place, and they're remaining static, which is good because they were strong indicators. Over on the far right in my notes, you can see that's where our work comes, is that the perceptions of risk, the use, et cetera, increase as students get older. And so we have some things to dig in there, into there as a community and as a school district. And this is the next slide with the rest of the data as far as significant changes. Again, prescription drug use, risk of that, et cetera, those numbers have remained static and strong as far as we want students to understand the risks behind them. But when it gets to marijuana use, marijuana risk, peer disapproval around marijuana, and parent disapproval around marijuana even has changed over the course of time. And again, we could hypothesize around that. Some of it might be with the laws passing across our nation, legalizing the use. But we have some things to dig into there. This slide indicates that additional measure that we put in. We wanted to find out what sorts of things would help keep kids from using in the first place. And this data really aligns with some of the perception data, is that our peers and our families make the biggest difference in the end. And from our families and from our peers, that's where those personal values kick in. So when you look at this, this graph, it really supports the efforts of the Substance Abuse Prevention Council and the Youth Commission in general. As well as it supports us really working with kids on an education factor. If 68% say, yeah, wanting to know the long-term risks could help prevent, we need to make sure that we're still educating students accordingly. Next steps here is that we need to share the data more broadly. So once summer ends here, the Substance Abuse Prevention Council will come back together. We are hiring that Drug-Free Communities grant manager who will then share data with supporting groups in the community, public health, et cetera, so that we can unite our efforts. We want to make sure that we are sharing information with the educators in our buildings, not only on what to look for if they have concerns about kids using, but also how to educate them. And a lot of that falls onto our health classrooms classrooms, quite honestly. And we want to make sure that, I need to make sure that I'm supporting the new person coming on board, because it's a really important effort, not just for Grand Forks Public Schools, but again, for Grand Forks writ large, that we are digging into how to make our community a healthier place, which is really what this is all about. I will at this time entertain additional questions if you have them.
Any questions from board members at this time? If none, this is a item for discussion, so no action needing to be taken. So we will move on to the next item. Thank you. Item number 4B is a student transportation update, and I will turn this over to Brandon.
Yeah, thank you, Vice President Anderson, members of the board. I'm here primarily to hand this off and do a little introduction here for John McLaughlin. He's the owner of Valley Bus, and we've been now a partner together here for a year. And he's here to give an update. It's the time of year just to look ahead and see what we're looking like for busing, and then I will be happy to maybe add an update or two or stand for any questions from the district side as well. Otherwise, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Brandon. My name is John McLaughlin. I'm the manager of Valley Bus, including Fargo and our West Fargo operation, as well as Grand Forks. We do have a local manager, Rosalind McKenzie, who handles just Grand Forks. Thank you for giving me a few minutes to tell you about transportation. And I've got really not a long presentation, no PowerPoints, just a few salient facts and observations. And then if you got some questions, I'd love to have them. As Brandon said, we started last year. July 1st was our first year. And I've got to say, overall, I think it was a good year, but let me qualify that a little bit. We came in and it was essentially a startup operation for us because we didn't really know the city, the schools, the school board, the routes, anything. So in that sense, we're a startup. We were fortunate to bring on quite a few of the prior organization, both managers and drivers, and I think we did a good job of assimilating them. So it isn't like we're starting from scratch, but over the year, I think we learned a lot. And I have to thank our local manager, Rosalind, for doing a great job, as well as her team. I also have to thank Brandon and the people of the school district, Allie, Mike Biermeyer, special needs folks, for being patient with us, because even though I think it was a great year for learning what really works and doesn't work here in the community, we got off to a rough start last fall. We thought we'd have about 3 more drivers than we did, so we started kind of behind the 8 ball in terms of number of drivers. Same with paras. We didn't have enough paras because people that we were expecting didn't come. So we ended up using temp services and training paras, and we also didn't have a dispatcher right away, which meant the phone wasn't answered right away, but we solved that. And over time, I think we learned how to do things better. And we also had, I got to thank Dave Tice and Cat folks too, because they ran 3 of our routes last year when we just were coming up empty with new drivers. So that was last year. Good year, good learning year. I feel like a football coach that the team just went, 6-6, maybe 5-6. I don't know, but I'm looking forward to this year. And I think this year we've got a better story. We seem to have enough drivers right now. We seem to have enough paras on board ready to start. The bus fleet is in good condition, so everything looks pretty well organized. Allie and Brandon have done a nice job of organizing the routes. So I think we're going to have a better year this year. I'm always hesitant to be too optimistic because just like in football games, sometimes the ball gets fumbled or something goes south on you, and maybe some people won't show up, but still, I think we're in a lot better condition than we were last year. And most importantly, we now understand the pushes and pulls of the special needs department, and we understand who the kids are. I mean, every special needs student is an individual that has special needs, hence the term. And we know those kids for the most part now, and we know the principals, and we know the pressures and pulls of doing the routes. Just for an overview of where we are, we've got 63 employees here in Grand Forks, a combination of both full-time and part-time. I mean, it's probably 9 or 10 full-time and the rest are part-time. We have 21 morning routes, 23 afternoon routes. This year, I think there are 4 midday routes. Last year, I believe there were 6, so there's a little pressure off on the midday routes. From a driver standpoint, we ended last year with 23 drivers, and we expect to start this year with either 27 or 28. We're waiting on a couple of exams to happen here. And we ended last year with 25 paras, and we expect to start the year with 27 to 31. And the paras don't seem to be the real constricting factor for us. It's more the drivers. To train a driver, you recruit them, they have to pass the permit test. They have to pass an online ELDT, entry-level driver training class. They have to then go have behind-wheel training, and then they finally test and get their CDL. So it's a roughly 1-month process to get a CDL driver. Recruiting is, because of the manpower issues that we've had, recruiting is the most important thing that's going on. And we look at recruiting as war. Sounds too warlike, but that's what it is to us anyway. It's a war with multiple battlefronts. So we're active on Indeed and other job boards. We're active in social media, Facebook. We go to the job fairs. We go to UND job fairs. We look at job service and see what they have. Just this year, just the last month, maybe you've seen them, we've had billboards up, electronic billboards in the community. And one of the things that really helped put us over the edge in terms of number of drivers is we decided that we had a backlog of paras who just said that, yeah, I might drive, and maybe I can work myself into that once I'm comfortable in a para. Well, we offered a $500 bonus to anyone in July who could pass their permit tests, which is the first most difficult step to going on getting your CDL. And 4 or 5 paras went through and got their permits and have been in training, passed, and are also still expected to pass. So those are a lot of the recruiting things that we do. We recruit both from Fargo and here. We have a staff of 4 recruiters that do various things in Fargo that then bridge over here. But we work closely with our local people too. So that's my quick summary. If anyone's got any questions, would like further info, let me know. Sure.
Comment on a question, and you mentioned it, but I really think we need a shout out again to Kat and the city of Grand Forks. The job they did stepping up last year was phenomenal, and they did a good job. I'm assuming we're not anticipating needing their services this year?
If you'd asked me 6 weeks ago, I would have said, what's Dave's phone number again? But I think we're okay for now. And I think I've gotten word that they would really prefer not to be called upon again. And I'm saying that not because they have a negative attitude. I've never worked with people that are more easy to work with and professional than Dave and his group over there, ever, in Fargo or anywhere. I mean, they're super people.
Any other questions for board members? Amber?
I also just wanted to say thank you for taking a chance on the Grand Forks community. I think, we were getting to a place where we knew it was maybe time for a change, and for McLaughlin's to take a chance on Grand Forks, not really knowing the ins and outs of the community, was very much appreciated. And I think it also takes really great professionalism to stand up here and say, we weren't perfect in the start of the school year. And so I appreciate that lens that you're looking at that from. So thank you for that. I'm a mom of 2 kids in the district. So I have a middle schooler now and a elementary school student. We don't take the bus, but we do have a bus pass every year in case we need it. I'm interested in learning more, and this might be an ongoing conversation, but currently where we live, it takes an hour to get to school and back because they're the first stop of the bus route and the last stop at the end of the day. And I was a base kid, so I don't care that it takes an hour for them. I'm used to that ride. But I think for some of our families with access to, how they live and our new American population, there's just we've heard some things that there's a long time on the bus for some routes. And then some buildings may not have a route available. I'll caveat that to say I'm also aware that some of our Encore sites may not be fully staffed until October. And so I'm wondering if there's going to be an uptick in students needing to take the bus in September. So just kind of curious about when you come into a new community, how do you handle obviously you have to get to know the community first, but what kind of ongoing conversations do you anticipate or do you need from us to be able to determine where are the gaps, what do we need, what is an appropriate time on the bus, and how do we get there?
Well, the issues that we wait to understand better include head counts and the route times. Those are like the two basic issues. And you really, every fall, don't know exactly how many people are going to be on the bus. There could be, 94 people eligible to ride and only 35 ride. So we wait to see for a couple of weeks how the head counts are before we start adjusting stops. But then we can be pretty flexible, and we can move stops from one route over to an adjoining route that doesn't have as many people and try to relieve the pressure. And if we just can't do that, then it's time to be thinking of another route to put on there. Now the times, it's a little more difficult because there are some distances that need to be covered. And I know that was something we were fighting last year, especially when we had to double up one of the routes with two routes really on one bus because we just didn't have another bus or a driver, and that made both the head counts high and the time spent on the bus a lot longer. So if you've got, I think I would need to answer with more specifics by talking to Allie and talking to our folks to see what the good answer would be on the timing. That's something we fight in Fargo the same way, those same issues, and West Fargo.
I'd also be curious from a district perspective, it's always like the chicken or the egg, right? So people say, well, we don't have enough head count on that route, but, well, if you surveyed the parents of that route, you might find a need that people would reach out. And so how do we survey our parents? Is that an ongoing annual thing that we do with parents? I don't know what that process is, but does the district ask parents if they're in need of bus services, even if a route doesn't exist?
We don't. I'm not sure if the district does. We do get a lot of phone calls and a lot of complaints of it takes too long or there's just too crowded on that bus. Quite a few of them legitimate, some of them not really so legitimate because sometimes kids don't want to sit next to three different people and they'll walk and say, I have to stand in the back, but there were open seats in the front. But at any rate, to address that, we have a monthly transportation meeting that Brandon instigated, and we get together and we compare notes on the things we've done well, issues that are arising, and that's probably the best forum for that to happen.
Yeah, and just to comment on that district perspective is every year during the registration process, there is that option when you're renewing your student's registration that I'd like to be a part of busing, and that's just for the regular ed routes. The special education routes are done a little bit differently, but they'll change constantly because that information doesn't just come in one time a year. It comes in as the need. As it gets colder in the fall, there'll be a whole new set of need for students. So it's constant, but we haven't administered a survey to parents recently, and it might be a good idea to gauge that broader attitude about it.
Is that option available? Like, does that question get asked at schools that don't have routes currently?
Yes,
like, does that question still get asked?
It's a universal question for all those students, and if we get a phone call and somebody makes the point of where they are really seeing that they need service, then we work with Valley and we figure out a solution.
You mentioned new Americans. That's an interesting perspective for us here. In Fargo, about 30% of our employees are new Americans, and they're great folks. are there on time and work hard, and that is both driving and as paras. In Grand Forks, it's just a handful. And I've always been scratching my head, even banging my head against the wall, trying to figure out how can we break into the new American community here. And we've tried a few times with emails to different people and attending a job fair for new Americans, but we have not been successful yet on that. And if anybody here has advice on that point, we're very experienced training new Americans, even with some language problems. Our trainers work with that every day. We're experienced from a dispatch standpoint with handling communication issues and train on how to handle emergencies, even with 50% English skills. And we're very open the way we run our business. It's open to everybody. In fact, we were complimented a few years ago for how we've reached out to the new American community and done such a good job of providing them jobs. And I answered back and said, we want to hire drivers. We'll hire anybody who comes in here that passes the background check and wants to be trained. And we support and encourage everybody to do that. And it just so happened we hit the mother lode, I guess you could say, in Fargo, where our office is right across the street from the mosque, which doesn't hurt either, probably.
Any other questions?
Josh? Brandon, you mentioned monthly meetings. Does that happen during the summer season, or is that a school year only thing?
No, it's year-round.
And there's been mentions of Allie. Is that a school district employee?
Yeah, yep. Sorry, so Allie Hillebrand would have been here tonight, couldn't make it. She's our transportation coordinator. It was a position that came out of the district about 2 years ago, a little more than 2 years ago. And up until this point, just with the driving with bus drivers, she spent a lot of time in the cab of a bus. And really that position is meant to be a little more strategic, a little more forward focused. And so with the driver update you received today, we're excited too to have her not in the bus and working on these issues. And just a couple examples, things that she's working on now is with any concerns last year, she's trying to get ahead of that. She's clearly communicating just when a principal or a teacher would pick up the phone and call her directly or call Valley. She's out there helping coordinate field trips. She just put in an order for bag tags that have clear markings especially our youngsters, just which route they're supposed to be on. The first day is always a little chaotic, and so we're clearly working that out. She sent out the student rosters today to both Valley and the school system. So it's those types of things that position really handles.
And that's a good point about communication that she's doing. I said we really looked at this like a startup. One of the hardest aspects of any startup is to figuring out where the lines of communication should be and then making sure that they're really working and people aren't just hesitant to ask questions. And, what's that? There is no such thing as a dumb question. Just to have a good flow of communication is, over 50% of the step towards success anyway. Which, again, I'll compliment the district with the people that we've worked with. It's been excellent.
Amber.
Do we have a contract with you guys for all or some of our athletics transportation?
We do charters with our yellow buses, and that is part of the contract, that we do the local charters and down to Fargo charters. But when it comes to Bismarck or Minot, longer charters, we had a right of first refusal on those, but we have a motor coach operation that is pretty much fully booked all the time, and we haven't been able to say blank, we can cover anything you have. We haven't gotten to that point yet. So I think that Mike has been using Triangle over in East Grand Forks a little bit. And we work closely with them. We did before we started here in Grand Forks. I mean, they've covered for us before and us for them. It's not uncommon. So we're good colleagues, competitive colleagues with them. Our goal is to have, as we do in Fargo, all of the motor coach trips covered, and we're building towards that. And in fact, on the near horizon, we're hoping to say that we're going to have at least one motor coach always up here ready to be used for trips. And I think I'm 2 weeks away from saying that. I've been asked to do that, and we had to do a couple of things back there to free one up.
Cool. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments from board members? If none, I would say thank you, and thank you for coming tonight. Moving on, number 5, superintendent's recommendations for action. A is the consent agenda. I would seek a motion for approval.
Second.
Dr. Lund, Eric's motion, second by Amber. We will take a roll call vote.
Lund?
Yes.
Palmasino?
Yes.
Flynn?
Yes.
Berger is absent. Clevin?
Yes.
Manley?
Yes.
Larson?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
7 yes, 0 no, 1 absent.
Motion passes. Item 5B, consideration of proposals to provide gasoline. Brandon.
Yes, thank you, members of the board. In mid-July, we put out the bid for gas fueling. That's both in town and over the road. We've gotten 2 responses here summarized in the cover memo for you. B1 Incorporated, or the Gateway Cenex up on Gateway, did quote a 10-cent discount at the pump, and Circle K Holiday Corporation a 7-cent discount at the pump. This is the same arrangement we had last fiscal year, where when convenient and possible, we're fueling on the north end at Cenex, and otherwise, especially over the road, we're taking advantage of that Circle K network and getting that discount at the pump. So the administrative recommendation is to accept both of these proposals, the Gateway Cenex for the priority in-town refueling, and the Circle K or Holiday Corporation for other in-town and out-of-town refueling.
Any questions? Eric?
Can you just tell me a little bit about what does other in town mean? Is that a convenience thing, or?
It's a convenience thing. We wrote that into the bid because if you kind of follow the logic of if you're down here on the south end and you say, well, you got to go up there and refuel, and you start counting mileage and people's time, it's not worth a 3-cent difference in the discount. So we're saying if you're on the north end and you have a half tank fuel, you got a minute, stop, fuel up before you come down to the south end. But otherwise, you know, Circle K is just a little further south on Washington.
Other questions? Jay?
So is there like, I'll say a standard protocol where we prioritize doing all this in town? I mean, I know there's some trips that are too long where you can't round trip on a tank of gas, but is there a policy to fill up in Grand Forks, get back to Grand Forks if you can? It's a mundane policy question, but I'm curious.
Yeah, I'd say that's procedural and exactly that, especially even just the courtesy of fueling the tank before you drop it back off for the next person. So we do most of that fueling in town, you know, and that's exactly what's spoken. I don't know, there's no board policy or past policy in that way, but I would say it's procedural.
Thank you.
Any further questions? If none, the administrative recommendation is to accept the proposals from B1 Inc., DBA Gateway Cenex for priority in-town refueling, and Circle K Holiday Corporation for other in-town and out-of-town refueling. Motion by Bill, second.
Second.
Second by Jay. We'll take a roll call vote.
Clevin?
Yes.
Manley?
Yes.
Larson?
Yes.
Flynn?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Berger is absent. Palmasino?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
7 yes, 0 no, 1 absent.
Motion passes. Item 5C, consideration of snow removal service bids. Back to Brandon.
Yeah, this would be the same time frame as the last bid process. We put this out in mid-July, and we wanted to get ahead of this and see who would take a response on this. For this bid process, we make ourselves available for any non-incumbent bidders to become familiar with our parking lot and needs for snow removal. So for 2 days, we will meet any interested party and drive them around and show them exactly where things are at, so that way we can give them a chance to respond as strongly as the incumbent. This year, we did get just the 2 bids. M&W Service teams up with Fertilon for 1 bid, and then Greg's Lawn Care came in with a 2nd bid here. Our current or incumbent in this situation would be M&W Service with Fertilon. They came in a little late in the season last year. We had awarded that grant to R&R Contracting, And then when we needed to make a change there, these guys stepped in and cleared the lots the rest of the year and did a really great job. So we were happy to see that they had responded there. We break up the bid. I should say we articulate the need in two different zones. And so it's possible that you'd have a bidder say, we'll do zone 1, we'll do zone 2. In this case, our incumbent bidder, M&W and Fertilon, said we'll do both zones, and we're not so interested in only half of it. And Greg's Lawn Care said, well, we can do half of it. And so in this case, that was the reality of the two zones. The rates do compare, where Greg's Lawn Care was a little more affordable in some categories, and they're attached here within the board memo for your review. So it was a little bit more affordable, but the reason the administrative recommendations coming forward with M&W as well as Fertilon is because they can cover both zones. We find that to be the responsible bidder in this case, and without their willingness to really split that, we wouldn't have coverage for half the lots. And the rates were on par with prior years' bids as well, so there's nothing exorbitant about those. Happy to answer any questions. As I mentioned, attached are the actual bid results from the two bids, but the administrative recommendation would be to approve M&W service with Fertilon for the snow removal vendor for fiscal year 25.
Questions? Amber?
Does this include any like sanding or de-icing, like if the parking lots get really icy?
I have to recall. Yeah, our custodians, they clear the doors and all the sidewalks, and they will sand, they will de-ice where needed.
Okay.
And that's a firm policy. As far as what they use out in the driveways, I just don't recall if they amend that or augment the snow pushing.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions from board members? If none, administrative recommendation is to approve M&W Service, Inc. and Fertilon as the snow removal vendor for the 2024-2025 school year.
I'll move to accept the recommendation.
Jay makes a motion to approve. Bill second. We'll take a roll call vote.
Flynn,
Yes.
Berger is absent. Manley?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Clevin?
Yes.
Palmasino?
Yes.
Larson?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
7 yes, 0 no, 1 absent.
Motion passes. 5D is consideration of resolution authorizing the issuance of and sale of $52,800,000 general obligation bonds, Series 2024. Back to Brandon.
Yes, thank you, board members. We had heard this, I think, at our last board meeting here, and the articulation is the same. Just to point out a couple of things that have changed and what the decision is here tonight is that this is still the same scope of work involved as it relates to the referendums of Valley Middle School, Central Kitchen, and the safety and security measures. This is also a bond measure or bond issuance considering the remaining portion of the energy efficiency or guaranteed energy savings contract that we have in place, improvements to HVAC systems. One thing that's different from last time is the Career Impact Academy consideration at $6.5 million needs to wait just a little bit longer. It's not in this issuance, so you would notice the overall number has come down a little bit. The reason for that is there needs to be a 60-day protest period on that component of it. I would say, my intention is the same. We're going to bring that back to you, and I have included in the cover memo some specific dates of when that 60-day protest period would come up, and it'd be back to the board October 14th. The other thing that had changed is the actual resolution. I put this at your table side here, and it's also been linked to the board packet, so if you're viewing this online, that's live right now too. We, as bond sales go, we're waiting until about noon today until we got in the pricing and we got the bids in. So that's what this updated document is. What was attached in your board packet was the exact same document, just without those details, without the figures or the numbers. As far as that bid, the issuance and the bids and how they came, it was favorable. We had 9 bids for this bond issuance, and it was a really tight grouping. all of those 9 bids were within 5 basis points, so it was a really competitive market, which is what you want to see. All told, the true interest being offered here by JP Morgan Chase is the 3.73%. And so when we've talked about modeling some of these numbers prior, we were even conservatively saying 4.5%, so we got 3.73%, so a little more favorable. So what tonight's action would be to complete the sale, as in it would set a closing date for September 12th, is to approve the resolution authorizing this issuance and sale of $52,535,000 general obligation bonds, Series 2024. That resolution, as I mentioned, is attached there as well. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions from board members? Jay?
The CIA funding will be in a separate authorization with a separate bid for the interest rate?
It will. And so you'll see that that resolution come to you in September, and really would be targeting this type of action October 14th.
Thank you.
Eric? Okay. Motion for approval. Is there a second? Jeff, seconds. Any further questions or? If none, we'll take a roll call vote.
Palmasino?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Larson?
Yes.
Flynn?
Yes.
Berger is absent. Manley?
Yes.
Clevin?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
7 yes, 0 no, 1 absent.
Motion passes. Item 5E is policy review, and I would turn to Amber for that presentation.
Thank you, Josh. I'm new to the policy chairperson since Cynthia's gone, so I'll try to fill her shoes. We have a couple first readings of policies and then rescinding another policy. So you might have to help me, Cindy, but we're taking these separately.
You can do either or.
Either or.
Okay. Does anyone have any preference? Yeah, okay. So we'll take the new ones as a group for the first reading. So that includes ABB, B, ABDA, DGHA, FDE, GABAA, and GABDB. All of these are outlined in the minutes and any discussion that was had for any of those, but the committee unanimously agreed to move those forward with the first reading. So I'll make that motion from the policy committee.
Questions from board members?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Eric. Any questions? Jay?
Yeah, so the ones that are first reading, those are all amendments to existing policies.
Yeah, I'm trying to see which ones.
Correct, yes,
Yeah.
they are, yes.
Yes.
Okay, so, because right now the memorandum has them listed as first reading of policies as amended?
Yep. Yep.
That's correct.
Yep.
Okay.
Other questions on that block? If not, we have a motion and a second. We can take a roll call vote on that.
Berger is absent. Flynn?
Yes.
Clevin?
Yes.
Palmasino?
Yes.
Larson?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Manley?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
7 yes, 0 no, 1 absent.
Motion passes. Amber?
And then the next one was policy BDAA, to rescind the contract supersede policy and regulations. That one was a policy from our policy template that was eliminated by the North Dakota School Board Association as it's too broad and therefore generally not useful. And the committee approved that, rescinding that one. So I'll make a motion to rescind that policy.
We have a motion from Amber to rescind BDAA. Is there a second? Jeff for a second. Any questions or comments? Jay? Do you have a question? No? If none, we'll take a roll call vote.
Clevin?
You're on.
Yes.
Larson?
Yes.
Palmasino?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Manley?
Yes.
Flynn?
Yes.
Berger is absent. Anderson?
Yes.
7 yes, 0 no, 1 absent.
Motion passes. I believe that was the end of your report, Amber.
Yep, that's everything we have.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. 5F then is the Finance Committee report, and I will turn that to Bill.
Okay. Yes, we did meet on the 3 items that are in front of you in your packet, the bids at the cafe out at the CIA and the EAPC design fees, and also shifting the funding for the HVAC program or project over at Ben Franklin. I believe we have a PowerPoint on all 3, so I'll turn it over to Brandon and he'll walk us through that, and then we can have votes. And I think probably you'll need an individual vote on each item when we're done.
Yeah, and if I could add, Bill, what we'll do here, I'll just kind of highlight these 3, and the PowerPoint that I'll give tonight is really just going to be for the 3rd item, but the materials are in there for you. As it relates to the Phase 2 culinary bid, I just wanted to highlight with that Career Impact Academy project, we did have a presentation from Sean Seneschal, JLG Architects, and what he brought forward was, the last piece to really finishing off the front of the house portion of the cafe at the CIA. He articulated that when that project was bid, it was well under budget, and even with this second Phase 2 was well under what was budgeted for that. It was very positive news. And the committee considered whether or not they would move forward with that Phase 2 bidding. Ultimately, the committee did approve that. And I think that's all the authority that needs to take place on that. Given a conversation back in January 8th, this board delegated the authority of change orders and when projects are within budget, that they be handled at the Finance Committee. So in this case, it's just all the information they received is available to you, but without asking for any action.
Yeah, and I think one point that we want to make just to the general public is that the estimate was at $150,000 for this item, and the bid came in at $57,000. So it was an excellent bid for the material, and it's for the cafe that is at the Career Academy, which will be the only place in the academy that students will have an opportunity to buy lunch or buy food at that location.
Yes, thank you. And I'm happy to answer any questions there.
Jay.
And this is for provision of materials to the project site. Installation of that is already in the construction contracts?
This is through Cullinex, and I understand that they are also installing it. This is just like if you consider the last items for the cafe side, your refrigerator, your coffee pot, things like that. So there'll be some installation, but not a tremendous amount. The second item discussed is a final approval by this board. So just to walk through that, the materials are included in the board packet. There's not on screen tonight, but they're referenced there. Ultimately, this is relative to the safety and security conversation, so it's a part of the referendum. It set aside $18 million for the safety and security measures. Up until this time, EAPC had been chosen as the firm to design, construction engineers, the firm to construct. And they've been really doing the work of firstly analyzing what needs to be done. There has only been a small scope of work done, and that's been changing out all the push-to-talk buttons in all the buildings, so that perimeter security right away. And they've approached the project in a series of tiers. And what you're seeing here is now that EAPC has really gone and figured what some of this design work would take, they're coming back with that amendment to their original contract, which for the first time is actually articulating what the total cost is. So we had Casey Hutton present from EAPC to talk through that. He would be here tonight. Unfortunately, he got a summer bug and could not be here tonight. But you can see in his memo, there's a variety, there's a difference in each of these projects. Every project's a little bit different. When they first bid, they had quoted that they would fall somewhere between that 5% and 10% percent of construction costs, and you're seeing here that a number of these are, where are my percentages here? Near the top of that, 7.5% to 9.5% in some cases. You know, Casey presented the conversation about, you know, why it is that rate, and when it comes to this scope of job, it's not going to be quite comparable as to when we're building a large contract like for a whole new Valley Middle School. You get a little bit lower number, maybe 6%. This is a lot of one-off projects that are each different and new. Some of these projects are really rehab within an existing building, which is a little different. Some of them are more complex and they take a variety of different trades. So there's a little bit of variety there, but what this effort is to consider the amendment to the professional services contract to really make sure that we've got them contracted to be paid for all this design service. Happy to answer any questions there. Casey would have done a better job explaining it like I think he did at the Finance Committee.
Any questions from board members? None? Okay. Want to move on to item 3 on that?
Well, in this case, that was a Finance Committee recommendation to the board for approval. And I thought, Bill, if you thought we'd take it one at a time, I could go through the last presentation and then leave actions for the end, or do it?
Why don't we take action first on this item?
I'll
So
make
it'd
a
be-
motion that we accept the A&E fees percentages that were for, I think it's Tier 1
Yeah.
for those activities. And I think just for information that I believe the construction, or the bids will be let, and I believe Red River will be done during the school year, but the remaining 4 will be done during the summer months because it'll be too much disruption to the school. So.
Okay. Bill has made a motion to accept the A&E design fees from EAPC for Safety and Security Enhancement Project. Do we have a second? Jay?
Sorry, Jeff.
Jay with a second. We'll take a roll call vote.
We have some discussion?
Yeah, sorry.
I think I understand it, and what saves this is the work description is clear enough to explain why there's a differential fee for one project or another. So no questions there. But what's the terminology Tier 1 and Tier 2 differentiating?
No, I appreciate that question. So as they considered, well, how are we going to approach safety and security across 18 different campuses, timing of that, they weren't really quite sure what they were doing. Tier 1 is really just a cadence to the work based on the locations that they're addressing. So they've grouped these, and you can see that in Tier 1 are the sites including Red River, Winship, Schrader, Wilder, Lake Agassiz/Head Start. Tier 2 would be inclusive of Lewis and Clark, Phoenix, Kelly, Central, Viking, South, and then finally Discovery, Ben Franklin, Century, Community High, and Mark Sanford. I haven't been in all the meetings to know exactly how they grouped, but I think it's elements of timeline, it's elements of disruption, it's elements of what makes the most sense to keep their crews engaged on a construction management side for efficiency. And so this has come from the design team and the construction management team.
So it's a phasing of work differentiator, not importance or critical path, or it's just a matter of the best process to do the work.
That's right, yeah. So
Thank you.
the way that timeline lays out is it's going to take a few construction seasons to get all the projects done.
Any further questions from board members? If not, we do have a motion and a second to approve. Roll call vote.
Larson?
Yes.
Manley?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Palmasino?
Yes.
Berger is absent. Clevin?
Yes.
Flynn?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
7 yes, 0 no, 1 absent.
Motion passes. Do you take the next
Okay.
item?
So what I'm going to put up on the screen here is a conversation that was had, a presentation made at the Finance Committee. Should take me just maybe another 10 minutes, and you might be sick of hearing from me at this point, but I'll try to keep it brief. Really what this conversation was about is about keeping in mind the goal of the general fund balance and the health of the general fund and how it can relate to the building fund and specifically around a key project here. So just a couple of slides of context and some of the goals of the conversation here. I want to point out here that our general fund is our operating account. This is where we pay all of our salaries, benefits, and all the things we need to do to operate the buildings every single day. It's intended for those types of operations, but not the capital improvement and deferred maintenance. There's been a history in the district of where that has been done. It can be done, but that's not the intent of the fund as much as the building fund. A couple other points worth knowing is that you can, at any time as a board, transfer money from the general fund to the building fund, but not in reverse. It can't be transferred the other way around. Leading up to this point in 2022, or even prior to that, when ESSER dollars first came to the district, there was a conversation about how they'll be spent. Federal requirements do say that 20% of ESSER 3 needs to be used for learning loss or addressing learning loss, and we're well over that mark by near 30%. But really, outside of that, the ESSER dollars could be used for a whole number of things, including at the time it was decided that this number, 3.779, would be set aside to help address an HVAC project at Ben Franklin. And that's exactly what has been done to this point. The opportunity today is to make a journal entry in fiscal year 24 to change that decision to use a smaller amount of the ESSER dollars on that project. The balance of that project was made up by building fund dollars. So in this case, if you say we're going to make the choice to spend just a fewer dollars of ESSER money on that project, we'd rather have you account for it in the building fund, you can free up some of those ESSER dollars for other priorities within the general ledger. And so that can help really keep the general ledger on that goal to 15%. But you have to watch the health of the building fund when considering that. So that's all context to this presentation, is really showing you that these two funds, can be linked in this relationship in kind of a unique time of opportunity, because the ESSER dollars will go away, and that's kind of the bridge between the relationship here. So what I wanted to bring the Finance Committee and the board tonight is these things: is one, improve the understanding of how these two funds can relate to one another. Know that the priority of keeping the general fund on that path to a carryover of 15% of expenditures by the end of fiscal year 26 is still in mind. We also need to keep in mind that the building fund needs to remain healthy and make sure it's there for any future projects that'll come. And then lastly is even starting a conversation at the Finance Committee to develop some parameters on the building fund, similar to how we set the goal of 15% carryover in the general fund. Where should the parameters be on what kind of a balance should we have in the building fund? So ultimately, the reason why it's on that part of your agenda for action is making a decision about that trade-off between the project being expended against ESSER dollars or building fund. So those are the goals. To do that, I just want to take you through a quick history and then a quick projection here, and that could really kind of take us to an understanding. Just a disclaimer here. These are numbers that include assumptions, and I wanted to disclose some of those assumptions. One, it reflects what you passed in a preliminary budget. So just so you know that, what was passed here at the body is what's included there. The 1.69 expense against the building fund, that's ultimately my recommendation, is the amount of money that we take less of the ESSER dollars and we expend it against the building fund by that increased amount. So just when you look at my graphs, you can know that that is in the graphs. And then lastly, just like the bond sale we had made, this is just saying these numbers are also included, the general obligation bond sales. And I guess lastly here is I make no assumptions about future projects, so this is just showing the balance. If there was a future need, that would certainly change some of those numbers. So here's a little history and a little bit of a story. This is your general fund balance. On the x-axis is the over time, that's all the years, going back to 1985 to the red bars, which are a projection in the future. I guess it's inclusive of 2024. And then on the y-axis, we have the percentage. So this is that carryover balance that we'd like to see the general fund at. At a quick glance, you'll see there's a history of a stronger than 15% balance, and you can see where we've been just recently, where we're below that. And that's why you, as a board, had set that goal for us. There's certainly a lot that's taken place here, and I know somebody who knows the history better than me, and that's Dr. Brenner. And so I would just yield the floor for a second. Perhaps you want to comment on this.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Brandon. Actually, if you go to the next page, that might help out the next slide, yeah. So in the early, around 2013, 2014, when the state took over more of the foundation aid payments, less reliance on local property taxes, that was one way that we lost some of our revenue locally. And then if you recall, when they got into the second biennium, they held higher ed, or they asked higher ed to cut their budgets by 5% and then 10%, and they held K-12 harmless over 2 years. Well, holding us harmless for 2 years was a freeze. You can, just COLA would be 3% a year. It was like a 6% deduct. At the same time, right at about that time, we did have 20 mills in our building fund, and 10 of those mills were taken away. And also at about that time, just prior to that time, there was some stimulus money that came from the federal government. So the previous leadership team had made a decision when they had 20 mills, when the state did take over more of the K-12 funding, and what we had in our building fund account to move forward with building Discovery Elementary, doing the Red River Performance Hall, Central Theater, and Cushman Track and Field. And then the perfect storm hit, and suddenly we didn't have, the 20 mills in our building fund, so we didn't have enough money in our building fund with the 10 mills to actually pay off our debt over the course of time. So fast forward 2021, in September, we brought the additional 10 mills back to the voters of Grand Forks. Those who came to the polls approved that, and it's really made our building fund a little more healthy. So that's the journey down memory lane of how we got into sort of that flat line of what was going on with the building fund balance when you get into 2015 and beyond. And just one more thing, and many of you were on the board at the time, because we didn't have a building fund to work with. We had catastrophic failures of boilers at several buildings, and we had to use $11.5 million out of our checkbook, out of our general fund, to pay for those catastrophic failures, and then to upgrade a couple of the relocatables at Viking Elementary. Thanks, Brandon.
Yeah, thank you. And that's where you see that dip down too, is the general fund started to be used for capital improvement. So through recent work, that's no longer the case. The general fund's not using it. In fact, the only piece of that remains is the ESSER dollars that were originally allocated, and that's what I'm asking. We pull back that allocation a little bit and use fewer of those dollars. So that's the general fund history, and Dr. Brenner took us through the building fund history just to point out, to make sure we're reading it the same. The middle line through the almost middle of the page that has all the fiscal year, or FY12, all the way through FY24, that's zero. And you can see a good chunk of those years it was spent below zero. And the spike is an anomaly of when you sell a bond and you bring the money in and then you spend it down on construction. So that's not a steady aim. So the history that I'll summarize here is the building fund hasn't had a balance for quite some time. And because the people of Grand Forks said you need a little more in there and voted that in September 21, we start to see that balance come up here. So projection-wise, this is what the general fund, as far as a percentage of carryover goes. I've heard the 15% referred to in this presentation a number of times. It shows right now with the preliminary budget that is in place what the projection would be to meet that 15%. So short of the long here is you're on a positive story, or you're on the right path to get there. Of course, when you structurally change the budget like that has been done, that means your revenues are stronger than your expenditures. That will persist if everything stays the same. So there'll come a time after fiscal year 26 where you've reached your goal of how much is in the rainy day fund, and you might consider where would you invest that dollars, otherwise the balance would continue to climb. The building fund pro forma also shows health. You can see the lowest bar is just under $4 million. So that's saying on June 30 of 2025, that's where the balance will be, just under $4 million. But I wanted a little bit more detail to this, and I gave a few more lines here just because there's some big payments that come out for Bank of North Dakota loans right after June 30. And so what I wanted to show here is more so that next summer, 2025, you look at a balance and you're really about $2 million is where that balance is. So again, much healthier than where it has been for some time, but it left administration asking exactly what should be our goals, how strong should this fund be, what kind of size projects do we want to take on. So with all the assumptions I outlined, this is kind of what the shape and the contour of the building fund looks like, and it's meant to impress upon this group that the maneuver I'm talking about, where we spend less of the ESSER and a little bit more of the building fund on the Ben Franklin project, is tolerable by this fund. But a couple of possibilities too. Last year we were successful with getting some new market tax credit allocation, which really brought an additional $2 million to the project. We are still eligible and are pursuing allocation this year, and with any luck we'll get that done as well, and that could certainly change the projections in a more positive light, so we'd see the building fund balance go up. Also have been working with some of the original partners on the Career Impact Academy as far as sponsor dollars raised and helping see that project all the way through. So we're engaging some of the friends on that project as well. So these are not numbers I want to put next to it. We're not counting on that. I'm just telling you there's some possibilities that are out there. When considering building fund balance and what might be a healthy balance, looked at some peers, and there's very little to glean from this slide because it's all over the place. You can see you have one anomaly, Bismarck, that's in the negative, and this is end of fiscal year 23, so it's a year's leg of data, but this is on June 30, 2023, what the balance are showing in these funds. So you see a negative one, you see another one that's 71 million. That would be an example of the bond sale they sold at 110 million, and now they're spending their way down through construction, so they're on their way down. But it's hard to glean what's a balance that you should aim for. I've talked to the state, North Dakota Department of Public Construction, and they have no particular guidance on the subject. And a lot of our friends here, when I had messaged with them and corresponded with them, they said, we try to keep it positive. I mean, I'm sure they're a little more formal than that, but it's about what we're at. So you ask, and this is the question I had for the Finance Committee, I think they're interested in taking it up, is let's set our own parameters. How might we approach it? We could talk to our peers. Again, there's not a lot of guidance there. There's some general maintenance of a portfolio of buildings, rules of thumb, 1% of your total building valuation. Perhaps it's a number by square footage. They're kind of, they need to be studied. At least for me, I would need to study those before we come with a suggestion. But clearly, some kind of effort to not only look at the size of buildings, but you're really trying to evaluate your liability that could go. And seeing as how we have a lot of brand new boilers in the system, maybe we don't need as much there. Roofing, as that gets addressed, maybe we don't need as much there. So there's a number of variables that certainly would need to go into this, but it's a worthwhile effort. So there's a lot of context to it here. Ultimately, what the conversation to be able to close out fiscal year 24 and keep us on a path like I've articulated with those projections would be to make a recommendation, sorry, this was for the Finance Committee, but it's for the school board's consideration to increase the building fund allocation for that project up a little bit, up from 2.39 million to the $4 million number you see on the screen there. So that would just be, it'd be a journal entry, it'd be an accounting effort here before the auditors come on site in October, and we talk it through with them. So it's a journal entry amount. So the ESSER amount would be 1.69 million. A lot of numbers, I apologize, but really it's an approval by the board to use the building fund dollars up to $4 million, or that number, sorry, for the Ben Franklin HVAC project.
Questions? Eric?
Just to make sure I'm thinking right, so we're not actually asking to spend more money, we're asking to grab it out of a different pocket in our pants, correct?
Yes, yeah, the project has been completed. Ben Franklin is air conditioned. I think folks are happy about that, especially on a day like today. But it's a journal entry as we close out the fiscal year books.
Jay?
So we're basically would be taking more building money to pay for a building. So that's consistent with the use of the building fund. Does this give us more flexibility and decision-making latitude in the operational budget? Because now we've got the more ESSER money that's going to be there. And that flexibility, does that sunset when the ESSER money sunsets?
Yes, so the flexibility is limited because ESSER money needs to be spent by 9/30/24. It's only a few months away, or 1 month, wow. But we've actually worked hard to close out the ESSER dollars on this past budget, so that means our goal was June 30, 2024, and so this is the last decision on that where we can close the books and be done with ESSER. What this means is, as far as the flexibility goes, this would free up the dollars to make sure we are still on that path towards the 15%. This would keep fiscal year 24 closing in the positive, and then future budgets building off of that to get to 15%. So there's fewer decisions, there'll be no more decisions to be made about ESSER, but it'll prevent any more difficult decisions on the general ledger to keep on that path of 15%.
So will we be able to spend the ESSER funds on something functional before the sunset date? Is that plan already in place?
Yeah, so the journal entry process would be, instead of saying, here's the receipt to the feds and this is what we want to pay for out of that ESSER, the Ben Franklin project, we're going to say it's salaries, it's benefits, and we have a list of things we've already targeted that would make it easy to do. But so it would show a reduction in expenditures on the fiscal year 24 budget, or year-to-date actual.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments from board members? If none, we can see the administrative recommendation is to take Finance Committee's recommendation to the school board to increase the building fund allocation for Ben Franklin HVAC project to a total of $4,084,675.83. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Jay, motion. Second?
Second.
Joel with the second. We'll take a roll call vote.
Berger is absent. Flynn,
Yes.
Clevin,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
Lund,
Yes.
Manley,
Yes.
Palmasino,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
7 yes, 0 no, 1 absent.
Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on in the agenda to number 6, item A, announcements. Are there any announcements? Dr. Brenner, no announcements at this time? Oop, sorry, Ms. Glatch.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair Anderson. So we got an email today from CTE Director Eric Ripley celebrating the fact that our district has been chosen by the U.S. Department of Education to move on to what they call Phase 3 in a work-based learning competition. Really, what they want to do is build ecosystems around workforce readiness, and the Career Impact Academy is a big part of that. And so with that comes some coordination, some professional development from the federal level, and we would, if we complete the Phase 3 well, we would receive an additional $150,000 award. So hats off to Eric Ripley and Cara Davis and Paul Zettler and Joyce Larson and Sharon Niesheim for leading that effort. Really a big deal. Top 10 across the United States. It's a pretty big deal.
Thank you. Other announcements? If none, we'll move on to item 6B, board requests for future consideration. Any board requests? Seeing none, moving on to item 6C, school board meeting norms. Bill, how did we do?
We did fine.
Thank you. At this time, we are adjourned.